George, Dino, welcome to the Ceres podcast.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, Dan.
Tell us a little bit about both of you and tell us a little bit about your business. Get us started on that.
So we're a family business. We've been going since 1966. We're currently operating 7 sites across the East Coast with a further 3 sites that we're planning to open this year. We've got over 2,000 covers that we like to fill daily. We employ over 350 people, and yeah.
So it's a big operation, but we're very much hands on. So we're really stuck in, and we handle the day-to-day running of each of those sites, and like to really interact with the whole team. So yeah.
So at the moment, one of the biggest things going off is, I'm sure people are sick of the word, which is COVID-19, coronavirus, whichever you want to call it.
We've not heard of that.
Have you not heard of it, guys? No? So, what's it been like the last couple of weeks, and especially also zone into the last couple of days, because I think a lot has changed since the last couple of weeks and the last couple of days. So give us a little update on what it's sort of been like for you guys.
Yeah, at the moment, things are changing sort of hour by hour. It's not even day by day at the moment. And we've tried our very best to keep on top of those changes. We've been implementing things at sort of the grassroots level as quick as we possibly could. We've adapted to encouraging social distancing to the restaurants. Within the restaurants, once the restaurants closed, we changed that. We went to a click and collect and delivery service, pushing social distancing message within the takeaways. And today we took the big step that we decided to close completely. The time was up for us. We said from the very beginning that we prioritize nothing more than the safety and well-being of our team and our guests, and we weren't willing to compromise that. And we kind of felt the way things were going, we couldn't safely operate a takeaway business under these circumstances.
And if we was to break it down a little bit, so let's start, at the beginning, social distancing in the restaurant. What was that like? Did customers adhere to it? Was that easier to manage?
I actually think the restaurant side of it was easier to manage. We're quite fortunate. So our restaurants, on average, hold like 300 covers. So from our largest restaurant at Cleethorpes, that's a 520-seater restaurant. So we were really lucky when they sort of brought in the, tables need to be far away. We literally stripped it right back. We said, you know what? We're going to take out half them covers, so there's room between. It's quite spacious as it is, but we thought let's go to the next extreme. Let's look as if we're doing something, even more than what they're asking for. And we really, really did strip it back. And for as long as that was happening, the customers were comfortable. They were happy. They were happy with what was going on. But the reality is that was very much based on what was going on in the world as well. And at that time, the sort of the coronavirus threat didn't really seem as real as what it does today.
Yeah, Dino's right. I think the perception of coronavirus is what's probably changed more over the last couple of days, and it's that we've been really trying to keep on top of ourselves and make sure that we're managing everyone's expectations in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, because for as long as it was making sure that we had hand sanitizers on the desk of the restaurants for our guests to use and our team members to use throughout the day, and for as long as it was, ensuring that we were giving the tables cutlery after they'd ordered, so they were, unique sets of cutlery for that individual when they were visiting. For as long as we were implementing them measures, it was almost easy, and the customers, they took to it. It was really easy for them to adhere to, because essentially we were enforcing that on them, and it was almost as if that they wouldn't know any different. It was when it moved into the takeaway side of things, and when the decision was made to close restaurants, that social distancing practically became impossible.
Well, before we get on to that, what was the initial feeling like? Knowing that you had to close the restaurants. What does that feel like?
Okay. Well,
it's not something you ever expect to hear, and it felt very
surreal.
It felt like we were playing a part in a movie.
A really bad movie.
And because of the perception, especially amongst our guests, at that time, the general public's perception, especially what we were feeling in our community, was actually one of they were being a little bit put out by it, and it was all a bit draconian, all a bit over the top, and didn't really seem that relevant to us at all. I remember when we were told the restaurant had to close, the cities that we were in and the communities we were in had a total of 5 confirmed cases, which felt like absolutely nothing. So at the time, I think we appreciated the bigger picture because we were keeping our sort of finger on the pulse in terms of globally what's happening within the hospitality industry. But at least on a micro level, on a restaurant level, I think that our customers felt it was probably a bit OTT and over the top, and really struggled to understand the significance and the relevance in terms of their own particular circumstance.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of, that's the news that, we built these restaurants up over the last 5 years, and we work, 7 days a week in them. We're really hands-on. We serve every customer. We love what we do. And, we felt that. We really did feel that. And it wasn't nice news. And it definitely hit us, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was strange watching the news. I mean, as a society, and this is not really relevant to our restaurants, but just as society in general, we tune into the news at 10 and we see that, some countries had a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or, some horrendous illness. And we're really used to watching this. In fact, it's on every single night, but it never seems to happen in England. We're quite fortunate. We avoid all of that. And actually, for the first time, you felt like the newsreader and the Prime Minister were speaking directly to you. And it was a really powerful and quite moving moment. And I know a lot of the team were watching it on their phones in the restaurant. And
we had a lot of tears.
It was a really quite emotional moment when we found out that actually we were going to have to close. And,
so then,
go ahead.
So how did it, when moving on to sort of like the takeaway then, what was it like trying to enforce this what is now known as social distancing? Like what was that like?
Yeah, so even before the restaurants were closed, we had sort of clocked that things weren't going great. And as soon as Boris Johnson said that, guests, the general public was to avoid restaurants and pubs. As soon as he said that, me and George were pulling the all-nighters. It was 6 o'clock finishes every night, 6 a.m. finishes every night, trying to implement changes to the restaurant, but also trying to look at what potentially could happen if the restaurants were closed. So even from that point, we were really on it, and we were really trying our best to sort of come up with alternatives if the restaurants were closed. So I guess when he did close the restaurants, we weren't surprised by it, but obviously it still hit us because it was words you never expect to hear. And I think that some of the changes that we had sort of planned on making were suddenly real changes that we were going to have to make.
We've got an amazing team, and we instantly sort of had our own crisis meeting amongst all our area management and senior management team. We sat down instantly and decided precisely what
before the restaurants were closed.
Well, before the restaurants closed, we decided what the government guidance was at the time. We appointed one particular person who was going to sort of be on top of checking that hour by hour if there were any updates and feeding that back to the whole team, and really looking at implementing steps, because you've got to appreciate at this point we were determined, whilst there was no provision for our team, we were always determined that we would remain open to keep them employed unless it actually jeopardized their own health. So in terms of implementing the social distancing, we had a whole team set up to make sure that was implemented. Within an hour, there was posters in every single one of our 7 restaurants. I mean, logistically, it was difficult, but we wanted them out instantly. We had
tables out of the restaurants being moved out by lorries.
We had tables and chairs being removed from the restaurants. There wasn't even an option for that social distancing to not be adhered to. We had social distancing measures and contactless payments set up in every restaurant and takeaway. And we had a briefing put out to the whole team with within a night, sort of, these are the measures, this is what we're doing. And realistically, we anticipated a huge, significant fall in trade. And we sort of said, well, we're willing to stomach that if it keeps everyone in a job for as long as the Prime Minister and the government actually set aside a provision to make sure you guys are financially secure.
Yeah, and because at the time there wasn't any such provision. But sort of our outset and our look on this was, okay, so this isn't happening because Papa's has done something wrong. So we were looking at this in the face and saying, well, we've not done anything wrong here. The reason that we're getting quieter isn't as a result of anything that we've done. So what we now need to do is we need to protect the people that essentially have looked after us for the last 5 years. And then people were our team members. So from the outset, we were dedicated to ensuring that they were going to be they were going to have security.
If there's one silver lining that we can take from this, and it's been really hard, but actually it's very rare that we get the opportunity to show our team on a macro level just how much we're willing to do for them and how much we really care about each of their individual circumstances. And the feedback we've got back from our team has been amazing. It's been a real opportunity to enforce our message that we really are one big family, and families about sticking together through triumph and adversity. And the love we've been shown back has been unparalleled. And it's been, me and Dino have said many times, actually what we're looking forward to doing is actually getting back with everyone, and how much we're going to miss everyone. It's going to be the hardest thing.
I think it's shown us that, not only do we love our team, but they really do love us as well. And I'm so proud to call each and every single one of them like part of our family. Like they really, really are. They've shown their true colours, and I'm really proud of them.
So one thing I was sort of thinking about, and I wanted to ask George this more so because of his background, and I've got one for Dino based on his. But from a hygienic point of view, do you think the staff got it? Do you think they got how important it was? And also onto that, do you think the customers got it? Especially when you started social distancing.
If I'm perfectly honest with you, no, I don't think people do get it at the moment, or at least when the measures were put in place, I don't think anyone got it. I think the best scientists in the world are struggling to accurately model and plot the potential impact of this virus. But I think by all accounts, it's not looking great. And the best example that we've got that we can look at is countries abroad, China, Italy, Spain, and we're on a similar trajectory to a couple of these countries who've had hundreds and some of them thousands of deaths. Our only chance of really flattening that curve is by acting now and taking drastic measures like closing. And I think we said, and we openly said, that the reason that we've had to act so abrasively and so drastically is because it's really hard to impose those measures on people and actually force them to do that. And it puts us in a very difficult position. If we've set aside gaps in the queue where we want people to stand just to ensure that they're, observing the social distancing rules, and they don't observe those rules, how can we actually implement them? Are we putting ourselves in a difficult position? Are we arguing with people when they're not really taking it seriously? I mean, the world's got a long history of pandemics and we've always survived them. But actually, it doesn't mean that we don't need to do our part and we don't need to, take measures like closing takeaways. I mean, we're a tenacious industry. We're known for our resilience. We've always made changes and we've always adapted. But, we've really struggled with trying to comprehend people that aren't acting in a similar manner to us. We're trying to get our head around people that aren't deciding to close their businesses, because we just think that's actually such a risky stance to take and such a dangerous thing to do for your community.
From a legal point of view, I feel as though we put signs out when there's a little bit of water on the floor. and we take such massive precautions to ensure that our customers' dietary requirements are adhered to, and intolerances. We wouldn't dream of cooking a gluten-free piece of fish in a normal pan. And when it comes to this virus, I feel as though people aren't taking it even as serious as a dietary requirement or as serious as a bit of water on the floor. And I think that that's really dangerous. I think anybody claiming that, they put measures in place to ensure that their takeaway is safe to visit, I think that's a really risky statement. And I just feel as though, from a legal point of view, they should limit their liability and definitely choose their words wisely, because I don't believe that anyone can be sure that any of their takeaways are safe. And I think that that's something that, we were really acutely aware of. And, there is no measure you can put in place because, unfortunately, the government currently doesn't have adequate testing facilities to identify whether or not the person stood behind you has the virus or they don't. And I think that any takeaway thinking that, their takeaway counter is 2 meters away from their guests that they're serving, they just don't have that distancing measures in place. So I think it's just dangerous. And me personally, I wouldn't want to be at the end of a claim for someone saying that they caught coronavirus in my takeaway.
Or worse, a member of our team
a member of our team saying that they were forced to come to work or they were asked to come to work and put in direct risk of contracting the virus.
So I think that's one of the biggest things that everyone's sort of concerned has been customer facing. And when actually, I think really it should be staff facing, employee facing, really, shouldn't it?
Yeah, precisely. I think every time that, anytime a member of our team comes into our building, they're our responsibility. And we are so strict with making sure that we're mopping the back and putting wet floor signs out so we don't have any claims from our employees. And yet one thing that, people are forgetting, or at least they're negligently forgetting, is the fact that we're putting these distancing measures and provisions in place for our guests, but we're not doing the same thing for our employees. And, you can say to me, oh, yeah, well, I've only got 2 people stood on my takeaway and they're separate. But the reality is, they're going to come into contact. And that's just part of our job. It is a very hands-on job. And you're going to touch things that 20 seconds later someone else is going to touch. And, this virus is a lot more serious than what people are acknowledging.
The only people who can legitimately say that they've got to go to work to take that risk should be the doctors and nurses treating people with this virus. For us to put ourselves on the same pedestal, I find really quite infuriating, and I find it quite patronising to the people on the front line in the NHS.
We're not frontline workers.
I'm struggling to marry together the socially responsible image of fish and chips that we all love to portray as an industry, one that encourages ethical sourcing and responsible employment and integration within our communities. And then we marry this with an industry that's willing to remain open despite serious health implications to our guests and the wider community. Sorry, go ahead, Sal.
Sorry, just to interject. And as of 20 minutes ago, we've seen, not as of 20 minutes ago, but the latest closure is KFC, Griggs, Pret a Manger, Starbucks, Costa Coffee, Nando's, McDonald's.
Yeah.
And I wonder, do they know something we don't, George?
Well, can I be honest with you, Sal? Sorry to interrupt.
No, I was just going to tell you what they know. They know that they're putting their team members and the general public at risk, and they've acknowledged that, and they're taking responsibility for that. And I think, and I call upon every takeaway to do the same thing. This isn't a time to profiteer. This is a time not to provide people with food. That's what Tesco's there for. That's what the supermarkets are there for. This is a time to be responsible and let the general public not have the choice of visiting a takeaway and standing in a big queue.
And I think that the big companies are starting to acknowledge that this is a race to the top. It's not a race to the bottom. It's a race to look socially responsible, not a race to make as much money and, like Dino said, profiteer out of this virus. If you really want to serve, and I've seen some posts on Facebook from other shops, and I completely appreciate we're all in completely unique circumstances. But I've seen some posts online from other restaurants or the takeaways saying that they're serving their local communities. That's the reason they're keeping their doors open, and they're doing discounts for the NHS. Well, if you really are serious about serving your community, then let them stay at home. Encourage them to stay at home. Yeah. Offering deliveries and offering click and collect, that's not a service. For as long as you're making any kind of margin, that's a business. That's the way we interpret it. But by closing, you actually enforce what needs to be enforced. And, if you really do want to help the NHS, don't give their workers 10% off. Close, give away the food to the workers if you really care that much. But more importantly, help the NHS by helping us flatten that curve so it doesn't get overwhelmed and so we can't actually get this pandemic under control.
So no, all our excess stock, we donated it to the NHS, we donated it to food banks. And the reality is that is such a small thing in this bigger picture. The reality is, like George said, this is a pandemic, and the quicker that we react as an industry, as a fish and chip industry, the better we're going to look at the other end. At the moment, McDonald's look great, KFC look great, fish and chips, on an individual basis, we've done our part for our community, and I call upon every takeaway to do their part for their community.
And the feedback for us has been amazing since we've closed, and the public really appreciate it. I think there's a lot of mixed messages. The government have got clear guidelines stating that takeaways and delivery services should remain open,
or can
remain open. More to the point, but you've got to consider that most takeaways, when you think of Indians, Chinese, and pizzerias, when you think of those places, you don't imagine a long line of customers out the door. That specifically pertains to our industry and our takeaways. So by failing to act responsibly, my biggest concern is we're going to put ourselves in a position where actually we're going to get called out on an individual basis.
Yeah.
And it's going to become actually fish and chip shops are causing large gatherings. So fish and chip shops need to close. Other takeaways can remain open. And as unlikely as that sounds, it's quite frankly not a risk that I think we should be taking as an industry. It's got quite a solid reputation.
I think the other thing is go on, Dino. Sorry, go on.
When this is all said and done, fish and chips will do really well, and we're going to come out looking great at the end of this. It's going to be the takeaway of choice, and I don't need to explain why that is, but fortunately, at the moment, we don't have any stigma attached to our takeaway. Now, that for me is something that I don't agree in anyone running the risk. Anyone running any sort of risk on that. I'm quite comfortable looking at this pandemic and saying we've done nothing wrong. However, if we do stay open as an industry and we are trying to profiteer from this, then I'm concerned that we're going to be looking at our takeaways going, well, yeah, everyone in the community hates us because we helped spread coronavirus.
Yeah. And look, people will pass blame where they can. So you might as well make sure there isn't any blame to be had.
Precisely.
Yeah. Well, look, guys, I just want to say thanks for your time. I hope that you're all safely at home. And
absolutely.
We definitely are.
and definitely.
So I just before we do go, sorry, I just wanted to say that it's so easy for us to sit here as multiple operators of many different sites and tell people to close, and I do appreciate that on an individual shop by shop basis that there are financial difficulties in doing so, and some people they're concerned about how they're going to feed their families, and I'm not negligent and I'm not ignoring that. My issue here is that the government has actually been very good and they've got measures in place. And if anybody out there, whether you know me or don't know me, wants to know what their measures are and the measures that we're taking ourselves, please contact me, because there's so many options out there. There's grants, there's loans, you can get mortgage repayment holidays. You can extend your mortgage. So if you're concerned about your mortgage increasing, you can extend it for a further 6 months. So actually you never pay more. And the reality is that with all, and also of course, your staff is now also going to be paid 80% to just stay at home. And that's a really big statement by the government. So now, being as all of them things are covered, what are we staying open for? Because it was all well and good. We were saying we were staying open previously for the good of our employees, but now that's covered. And I just feel as though, you know, there's so many options. And if anyone's genuinely concerned financially, there are so many financial options out there to protect you. And I'm not oblivious to the fact that some people struggle on a daily basis without coronavirus.
Yeah.
So the last thing they need is to close. But, you know, just take the government's advice, because I promise you, as a result of this, fish and chips will do well. And just make sure that your takeaway is one of the takeaways that is going to be doing well.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, guys, like I was about to say, thanks for your time. And let's end it there. I think you've gave loads of great advice as well. And we'll definitely talk soon.
Thank you very much, Sal.